do you think Dodd should have been doing when he was in Iowa running for president and the economy was going in the tank?
Well,
how far ahead should he have seen the economy melting down?
Well, I'd like to hope that the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee would have actually been engaged with the material. I mean, he certainly had time to go to the fundraisers AIG was hosting for him. I'd like to think that he would have focused on the issues. You know, when I watched him last week on Face the State, I was very troubled by one thing. And that is when he was directly asked by Dennis and by the panelists about job creation and what was going on in Connecticut. He could not cite one specific example of creating a private sector job, nor could he set forth a plan for private sector job creation. He referenced some jobs at Pratt and Whitney. But that, to me, is not what a senator should be doing. He should be focused on job creation here in Connecticut. I think the senator took his eye off the ball many years ago, and unfortunately, his eye's not back on that ball now.
Well, what would you do for job creation in Connecticut?
Well, there are several things
if you
that
were
I would
senator.
do. You bet. The first thing is that I come from a private sector background. The only people I owe anything to are the people of Connecticut, not corporate special interests. What we should be doing is focusing on creating the type of high-tech corridors that you see in Silicon Valley, that you see in the Research Triangle in North Carolina, that you see in Boston. And what we need to be doing is saying, how do we get control of our electricity costs? How to create a first-rate vocational school system? How do you leverage off of the higher educational institutions you already have? How do you create an environment where business wants to stay, where business can grow, and where you can recruit other business in? We haven't even had that discussion in Connecticut. And to be blunt, when you try to have that conversation with one of these career politicians who's been in Washington longer than Moses and the Israelites have wandered in the desert, their eyes glaze over because they have no background in this.
Well, state lawmakers have invested in nanotechnology, fuel cell technology, film credits. What would you do to help those areas?
Well, what you have to do first and foremost is go out and visit these companies and listen. One of the things I do each day is travel across the state and talk with companies, small, medium-sized, and large. And over, I'll say to them, has anyone ever come to visit you? Does anyone come from the federal government? Do any of your elected representatives come? And people laugh and say, Merrick, of course they don't come. Would the state be in the situation it's in if these people came and talked with us? And when you listen, they'll tell you over and over, every company, electricity costs have to be brought under control. Healthcare costs have to be brought under control. We need better infrastructure in the state. We need a strong vocational school system in the state. What happens is when you actually listen over and over, folks tell you the same thing. But you have to listen and then put the plan together.
Well, you've been listening for a while. Can you give us one specific example of how you would create jobs in Connecticut?
Yeah, I'll give you a very specific example. If you go to stores, I've spent a lot of time there. I went to UConn and I've been there recently, obviously, doing campaign events. When you go to stores and you look at the old Mansfield Training School, there you have a great example of what other states have done right and what Connecticut has done wrong, and when there's been no leadership on the Senate side. If you look at the old Mansfield Training Center, perfect facility for us to have a high-tech park. And we have a plan out there for it, but no one has ever taken the leadership role on it. That would create thousands of high-wage, high-tech jobs in Connecticut, exactly the kind I've created for most of my life throughout this country.
We have to take a break to hear from our sponsors. We'll be right back, and don't forget, another reminder, we are on Facebook, facebook.com/Dennis House WFSB. You can leave your comments about this broadcast on our Face the State page. We'll be right back. Briefly, a quick question. You worked on the campaigns of Gary Hart, Bill Clinton, and Al Gore. Do you expect that any of them will come and return the favor?
Well, Dennis, I would say this. I think I'm going to have a lot more friends on the night of August 10, 2010, after the primary than I did that morning. So I would hope that they'd be with me for the general election.
Any conversations with them at all since you announced?
No, I have not.
Okay.
I imagine President Obama is going to be helping Chris Dodd. Could you talk about your plans for health care if you were to unseat Dodd?
Yeah, I feel very strongly that we should have a system that has a public option. I worked 16 years ago on the Clinton healthcare effort. I was part of the National Healthcare Campaign. I went out as part of the effort to Oklahoma to try to organize for getting David Boren's vote, who was at the time in the U.S. Senate from Oklahoma. I feel as strongly today as I did then that you have to have a public option. 46 million Americans uninsured. Many of those are hardworking folks. I feel strongly that we should not be passing any legislation without a meaningful public option.
Democrats are going to be rehabilitating Dodd. They're going to be talking about his tenure and his seniority there. How can you argue against that?
Well, I think the seniority is a red herring. It's a canard. Did his seniority protect us from the banking crisis and collapse? Did his seniority protect the 1,000 jobs we just lost at Pratt? Did his seniority give him the good judgment not to get into Iraq and Afghanistan? Did his seniority help the people in Connecticut who've lost thousands of jobs, lost their homes, lost their futures, lost their savings? I know what his seniority has done for Senator Dodd and his family. To be blunt, it's made them very wealthy. But what has it done for the people of Connecticut? And I think the answer is very little.
Oh, I asked you before, and I don't know if you answered it directly, but when he was out in Iowa campaigning for president, when should he have spotted the problems in the economy?
Well, if you go back to 1999, Senator Dodd cast a fatal vote. He went and voted to repeal Glass-Steagall. That was a colossal blunder. When he did that and then took millions of dollars from the financial services industry that we sent him to Washington to protect us from, that guaranteed the train wreck. Go and look on the front page of the New York Times the next morning after that vote. You'll see Byron Dorgan, for example, who very clearly said, this is a disaster in the making.
Greg?
In terms of the economic collapse that's happened here, do you think that the federal government is doing enough? Do you think there needs to be another round of stimulus money put out?
I don't want to see another top-down program. What I want to see is a focus on Main Street, not Wall Street. I would urge people to go see Michael Moore's movie. I went to go see that the other day. And when you see Capitalism, a Love Story, and see how Senator Dodd is featured in that as, quite frankly, one of the folks that led to this collapse, you recognize that pouring more money into massive corporations, many of whom, by the way, on the financial services side, are posting record profits this week. You're going to be seeing coming off of Wall Street. My view is we shouldn't be giving those folks more money. We need to focus on the small business here in Connecticut.
That's all the time we have for today. I want to thank our guest reporters, Greg Klatke of the Hartford Advocate, the New Haven Advocate, and the Fairfield Weekly, and Ken Dixon from the Connecticut Post, Greenwich Times, Stamford Advocate, Danbury News Times, Hearst Newspapers, all of them, and of course the writer of a great blog, Blogorama. If nothing else, it has the best title of a blog. And Merrick, Alpert, Democrat Senate candidate, thank you for being with us again today. And we want to point out that we have invited all of the Senate candidates to appear on this program. All but one has said he or she will appear here. We are still waiting for that final person to commit. Next week we have Ambassador Tom Foley, followed by Peter Schiff the following week. I'm Dennis House, inviting you to join us each and every Sunday morning when more newsmakers will face the state. Have a great day, everybody.